All right.
Okay, I guess I have to consent. I consented. All right.
Cool. Thank you for consenting. Looks like we're recording now. So, everybody, this is Joel. Uh, he's an ENTP. Thanks for agreeing to have this conversation. I'm excited to ask you some questions. Do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. No, yeah, my name's Joel Lando. I've been kind of studying Myers-Briggs for probably just as a hobby for about 4 years, um, and you introduced me a little bit into the Jung typology as well, or cognitive functions, I guess. Um, and so I went down that rabbit hole a little bit. Um, and so yeah, this has been just my own personal quest, I guess, just to understand myself a little better, understand how I trigger other people or help them. What are my strengths and weaknesses and blind spots? And um, that's kind of the motivation behind it. But yeah, I'm an engineer by training, a mechanical engineer. I've worked in the aerospace industry for a long time, so it's just this is more of kind of a side hobby, I guess, more than anything. And I probably spend maybe about an hour a day thinking about it,
Cool.
so it's, yeah, I always love talking about it though.
Awesome. Yeah. So you're an ENTP. We've actually talked, quite a bit through social media, and you have a certain communication style that it's very direct, it's logical, and I really enjoy that. And also, you have a ton of ideas that just feel like they're just out there. But then when I think about it more, I'm like, actually, I think he's right. So yeah, it's been fun. Um, so I kind of want to go through just the letters of your type and ask you how, like, how you know that letter applies to you. So let's start with extroversion. How do you know you're an extrovert?
How do I know I'm an extrovert? Well, so yeah, this one's interesting. I actually studied a little bit about object relations, which um, you know goes into extroversion and introversion. And um, one of the things I learned about extroverts, and which I've kind of done the sanity check to see it, does that apply to me? Which is that extroverts interact with the objects that they're confronted with pretty immediately, pretty directly, immediately. It's There's not a lot of internal dialoguing or processing. It's more of a um, you know, I, I, I see a cat, I guess, for lack of a better object, and immediately I'm going to, either, typically interact with the cat or whatever. I'm going to do something. Um, it's a very, I guess, the main takeaway for extroverts is that we deal with reality as it comes. Whereas what I studied about introverts was that you know, introverts have this internal, and I don't want to take away your, uh, you know, steam or anything, but it seems like they've got this internal model, and I call it the Death Star of the universe, basically, going on in their head, where they create the cosmos in their head. And for lack of a better term, it's really like the Death Star. Got all this complexity and all this structure and everything, and all systems and interactions. And so if the cat walks into your purview, you you've got to insert that cat into the Death Star, into the model. You got to interact all the pieces and say, okay, does this cat still work in my schema of the world? And if so, all right, let's make some decisions here. So it's just a little bit more integrated, a little bit more, I guess, uh,
Passive?
a whole, yeah, a holistic
Oh,
kind of
okay.
process. Whereas I almost, when I kind of analyze myself, it's almost more of a knee jerk type process that I think extroverts have, um, which sounds very superficial, But I do honestly do think that we have a little bit more of a superficial interaction with reality. Um,
It's more straightforward.
More straightforward, yeah. There's more to that. I could go on, but yeah, those are just some quick distinctions. And I think that uh, I do have that kind of, you know, I'm not surprised by reality. In other words, it's not like, oh crap, I got to reinvent my whole Death Star model. I just go, oh, there's a cat there. All right, deal with the cat. And I just kind of ignore everything else for a second and deal with that external object.
Yeah, and
Um,
that makes you way better at improvising than me. You're right.
yeah.
You're actually right. When, when I see a cat, it's like I see that idea and I just sort of toss it into my head and I don't really do anything else with it. Like if an action comes out of my head later, then so be it. But at the point I observe something, I just sort of just add it in. So,
Mm,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, there's a few other threads. I mean, we could go on that, but it's like one interesting thing that I learned about extroversion is that we actually feed off of the introverts, and so introverts kind of are like the original content creators, if you will, of information and that bodily processing of taking information, putting it into your model of of the world or the cosmos, and then processing that as a as a body, as a soul, and then turning that into like actionable information. Well, extroverts will cull their peer group and look for those introverted processors that have actually done the hard, heavy lifting of bringing the cat in, deciding what to do with the cat. And then they will rank stack all those introverts and say which ones have the best ideas. And then the extroverts will basically suck out the best ideas and say, oh, yeah, that's what I thought all along. That's basically, not totally, but they'll do this quick, efficient scan um, of the information and do this kind of a faster decision process, kind of using you guys to do the heavy lifting a little bit. I know that sounds not very nice, but
No, no, no. I think that a great thing about human diversity is just the specialization aspect of it, and the fact that combinations of people and their skills and what they specialize in produces a better outcome than if everybody was the same. So yeah, I enjoy what I do, and you probably enjoy what you do.
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
So what about like socially? How has being an extrovert influenced your life and your interactions with people?
Yeah, so this is another interesting question because if you use the Myers-Briggs model, the ENTP is the second least extroverted on the spectrum. I think ENFP is the least or is the most introverted of the extroverts,
Yeah, I've
and the
heard that.
ENT yeah, and ENTP is the second or the second most or no, the second least extroverted of the extroverts, or second most introverted of the extroverts.
Yeah.
But but yeah, I tend to be pretty extroverted on the ocean scale. I was somewhere, I think it was close to 80%, 78, 80%, something like that, on a scale of 100.
Yeah. Okay.
Uh,
By the way, do you know where INTJs are among introverts?
um, that's a very good question. I do know that INFJs are the most extroverted of the introverts,
That makes sense.
and I want to say that the INTJs are not too far from there. You know what I mean? Close to, kind of close, maybe, but I'm
Yeah.
not 100%.
On
I'll have to
Ocean, I
double
think I
check.
scored 30th percentile. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And there's a really interesting website called what is it? Traitlab.com. And they do the mashup between Myers-Briggs and Ocean. And so you can actually click on your INTJ personality and say, how much does the average INTJ have of extroversion? And it'll create a bell curve, and you can see where you fit within the bell curve for that.
Interesting.
Yeah, I can give you the link after. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that'd be cool, and I can put it in the description. So cool. All right, let's move to the next letter. So how do you know you're an intuitive type?
Intuitive. Okay, so one of the distinguishing traits of intuitives is that um, they they like to connect things, so um, they like to. Um, I mean, I mentioned the Death Star model that the INTJ has. The NT types do this. I mean, ENTP actually has this too, but it's a lot more disorganized and random and subject to um, extraneous information. And also, one thing to know, we should probably say before we go too far, is the INTJ is the unconscious of the ENTP and vice versa. The ENTP is the unconscious side of your mind as well. And um, so when you're talking about intuitive, for me, it is really, I guess part of it is just, I mean, I I've got an INTJ colleague, and we were talking about this the other day. So what we found was when he took math classes as an INTJ, he was an engineer. When he took math classes, he had practiced and done a bunch of practice problems, and eventually he got to the point where he could pretty much tell what the answer was going to be, and then he just filled in all the practice work to get there afterwards. It's like he could jump to the answer almost with a lot of his math and just boom, 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 get to the answer. And he had this felt sense that, oh, I know that's going to be the answer, and it always was. And he knew that it was. It's interesting for him as an INTJ because I didn't like I didn't have that in my math. I had to do a lot more of the homework, but I was that way in physics. So when you take, physics is like applied math to physical, you know,
Yeah.
problems, and the ENTP has introverted sensing, which is very much the five senses. It's physics based, whereas the INTJ has um, extroverted sensing. And extroverted sensing it's just it's almost a totally different um, processing mode because it's about I mean, without going too far down that tangent, but it's just different. Introverted sensing is physics. It's very much tangible. I've got a very tangible sense of what I'm dealing with at all times. Kinesthetic. That's the word I was trying to think of. It's a
Okay.
very kinesthetic learning mode. And so when I was in physics, I I knew that I was gonna get the answer before I got it, and I had kind of a felt sense of what a lot of the answers would be. I don't know. It's hard to. It's almost like it welled up inside after a while, where it's like, oh, I can guess what it's going to be. Whereas the sense I get from the sensor community, the people that are sensor judges especially, is that gosh, I can't have any kind of intuition. I can't trust. Um, I can't trust any gut sense because I need to see the proof. I need to touch it, feel it. I need to experience it, and then revalidate it with my eyes. Whereas the intuitors almost form a distrust with their five senses. It's like I see what's being presented to me. I see what I taste, smell, hear, feel externally, but I almost don't want to trust it because sometimes there's something else going on behind the green curtain, if you will, behind there's Oz back there pulling the levers, maybe. I don't know. I want to run some simulations up here and see what's happening. But after doing that for a while, intuitives do get a sense, or at least I think that I get a sense of what is happening, and I can start to predict, okay, what's the next simulation going to be? What's the next problem going to be, or the answer?
Yeah, I've noticed a lot of what you said. I was a TA at the math lab at BYU, and I definitely noticed the difference between sensors and intuition people. You call them intuitors. I don't know. But like the sensors, definitely everything was step by step. It was very important for me. And actually, MBTI helped me a lot in knowing how to help different people. Because I was like, okay,
Mm,
this is a step by step kind of person. This is a conceptual type of person. And yeah, and I hadn't thought of that before with math versus physics and extroverted intuition versus introverted intuition,
mm,
because it kind of makes sense though, because the math classes, um, I don't know, my personal experience is I had a lot easier of a time with math. I minored in math and got a 4.0 in all the classes. Um,
there you
but
go.
but in physics, I struggled, and I felt like I spent a lot more time on the homework than other students, and a lot of what I was doing was running through concepts that I already had and trying to kind of deconstruct them and make everything fit together and put a lot of effort into that, and it took a long time.
Mm,
But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so I majored in physics because it was more difficult and I wanted to master it. And just I was a little jealous of the types that I think were probably INTPs mostly. Um,
mm,
where it's kind of like they took things at face value, or like they were already on the same wavelength as the teacher or something. I didn't really understand it. Just felt like it came a little more naturally for them.
right.
And
Yeah.
I would bring up questions and they'd be like, "What are you talking about?" And I'd be like, "Well, this whole thing that I thought was reality." And they'd be like, "No, just you remember like what they said, it's just like this." And I'm like, "Doesn't it bother you that there's like maybe it doesn't totally fit with this other thing?" And they're like, it just makes sense. I don't know. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. So INTPs, they have introverted sensing, which is physics. It's that, the sensory connection with the physical world. They have introverted sensing as their third function. I have introverted sensing as my fourth function, which means it's even a kind of a lower state of consciousness, if you will, almost towards the subconscious side, but it's
Hmm.
it's still technically, under the Myers-Briggs system, or I guess Jung's system, it's still within the four functions that's still conscious.
Yeah.
But yeah, INTPs, they've got a leg up. They're better at physics than I am, and the third function is really an interesting one because it's called the child function, which is the playful side. And so the INTPs, they can kind of take all the pieces of the puzzle in their mind in that third function, and it's more of a game to them. It's not under the thumb of a parent or a teacher or the principal saying, well, whoa, are you following the rules? It's more of, hey, maybe I want to break the rules, or hey, what about they get to that place where they're comfortable with all the puzzle pieces, it
Hmm.
seems like.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, let's go to the next one. Thinking. So, how what how do you know that you are a thinker rather than a feeler?
Yeah, well, that's probably the easiest one, which is that almost everything has to be rationalized. Like, I, and my job, the job that I have at work, I'm a root cause engineer. So it's, why did things happen? What if something blew up, what triggered it? And, sometimes there's a chain of dominoes of, the physical dominoes that fell over, and I got to trace it back to the first domino, like what tipped over first. And that's pretty much how an ENTP, or I guess I would say a thinker, probably navigates the world is they want to know what causes what. And it's like a logic gate, right? If
Hmm.
this, then this.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds fun, honestly. Uh, Figuring out what happened. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And I can tell, from our interactions that you primarily think through, a lens of logic. Um, yeah. Some people are a bit confused about whether they're thinkers or feelers. Um, and I have some specific people in mind that I might interview in the future, and then maybe people watching can help them figure out what they are. Anyway, yeah, okay. All right. Okay, the last one, perceiver. How do you know you're a perceiver rather than a judger?
Hmm. Yeah, so we've talked about this, and I think you actually helped me suss this one out, which it really is that um, I think in your words, what you had said is that perceivers kind of want to keep perceiving rather uh, than coming to a judgment or a decision point. So, and I think that this is true. I reflected on that quite a bit, which is, um, you know, the decision that ENTPs or perceivers in general will tend to make is that they'll make a decision to keep perceiving rather than to stop perceiving. Whereas judgers come to the point where they say, okay, you know what? If we want to live, somebody's got to make a decision and do something. So I'm going to stop perceiving. I'm going to make a judgment and act and turn off the information perceiving function and truncate the data, make a decision. Perceivers really don't like that. And and I think in your words, what you related it, you said that sometimes that can come across as, maybe counterproductive, right? It can be, and I'll fess up to that. I do think that is something that does affect me. But one thing that it's done is I've positioned myself in jobs where I'm rewarded to, even though I have to make decisions and get work done, I can still keep the perceiving function going. And so I work within a quality system, which has a lot of different tentacles. It's kind of like, the Death Star model of you know, that thing that we like to keep in our heads that shows how this is connected to everything else. So I've struck a balance where yes, I do need to stop and make judging decisions, but it's not in my nature. Like I want to just keep perceiving, and I want to, the analysis paralysis, right? I just want to analyze continuously.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes
Um,
sense. I I'm trying to understand why, like how it works with me because my first function is perceiving, but when it comes to the external world, I want kind of order. Um, so my attitude is fairly passive most of the time because I'm just perceiving. But then when it comes to how to deal with life, I just kind of want things to be sorted in their place. Um, yeah, it's kind of interesting. And as I've gotten older, I've realized how important it is also and I think everybody kind of goes more towards the middle as they get older and more mature. But one thing that I've definitely uh, become more, um, one thing that I've placed more importance on lately is the ability to continually like not shut off perceiving too early
hmm,
and not overpromise and not set goals and stick to them past the point where it makes sense.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've noticed that about the INTJs. You're really good at that, and which you need somebody to be able to be pragmatic and rein it in, rein the perceiving in, because it'll just keep going and going, and it really, it needs to stop at some point. And yeah,
Yeah.
I do think, I will say, the introverted intuition that you kind of approach things with, I do think there is a bandwidth issue, and I don't want to make it sound, there's a lot of ways to take this, right? Because um, and you can make it sound good or negative, good or bad, but because you're trying to build this model, and because you're trying to make essentially create meaning where this this model actually turns into what you want it to turn into, the world actually manifests the way that you want it to. um, you've got to take things one step at a time, right? Like one piece of the puzzle at a time, put it in there, and let's be very deliberate and intentional so that we actually achieve the end goal. Whereas I think ENTPs, we've been accused of having ADD, for example, and other things like that, because we can take in a lot of inputs and we can push out a lot of outputs, some that have questionable value, right? And so I would say there's more bandwidth, possibly on the ENTP side, more junk coming in and coming out. Whereas on the INTJ side, it seems that there's a little bit more discrimination of what comes in, and a little bit more deliberateness of what comes out of INTJs. It seems to me, anyway.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know. Um, it's I I think when I was younger, maybe this is particular to me, but I was kind of afraid of new information. I wanted to have fun with my theories, and I had
Mm,
that sneaking suspicion that they're incomplete. But it's also annoying to, like, it's stressful, it's tiring to encounter new stuff and be like, okay, all that work I put into creating that model of everything, it's, have to tear it down now. But
right.
yeah, the older you get, you realize that it's a waste of time to spend uh, too much time theorizing without
Yeah.
validating. So
Yeah. Good point.
yeah. So I kind of want to ask about the overall experience of being an ENTP. Uh, here's one thing that I'm wondering about, if you've perceived this, or if it's just something that is in my head. But I've known a few ENTPs, and we'll talk, and I feel like we get this like mutual respect, and they like totally understand me. And one thing that will happen uh with me that kind of makes me go like, okay, what the heck? Why why are they doing that? Is that occasionally they will uh it feels like we're totally on the same page, and then like a week later we're not on the same page at all. And I thought we like had a mutual understanding, but they kind of moved on to something else, and
Mm,
it just kind of like inconsistency kind of is what I've perceived. But then also from the other direction, uh we can have that kind of discussion again, and we're like totally on the same page, and there's a mutual respect, and I can tell they're like, okay, this is a smart guy. And then we go into a social situation, and I'm just like sitting there and passive, and I get the impression that they're like, okay, I thought this was a smart guy. Like, what the heck? What happened to him? And then
mm,
like at that point they kind of like distance themselves a little bit. They're like, okay, that guy, he's just kind of a weirdo. Like, he's smart, but uh,
mm.
what do you think about those two things?
Um, yeah, there's a lot there. I mean, yeah, I think we can. I mean, I do think ENTPs can tell the difference between introversion and smartness, and I would suspect that if they had, if we had interactions with somebody um, that were kind of at this high level where we were taught, we had logical problems we were trying to solve, and we we got to like a similar conclusion, I would think that there would be that mutual appreciation of, on an intellect level, but you can simultaneously have that as an ENTP. Like I have a lot of respect for the INTJs that I work with, and kind of secretly, I kind of suspect they're probably smarter than I am. I mean, in a lot of ways, I do think that, but I also I can hold the two thoughts in my head, which is yes, they're probably smarter than I am, and yes, they're kind of ineffective um, at motivating other people to take on their view and their, motivating others to, do the actions or do the, follow the thought process that they are going through. And um, it's interesting you bring that up because, like I work on a team of 7 root cause engineers, and the very second guy that I hired was an INTJ, and I screened for that, right? It's like um, we interviewed probably 10 people before we picked that guy. And that's one of the main things I was looking for is, are they an ISTJ or an INTJ or an ISTJ? There was a couple, I mean, I had a couple options there, but I was really hoping to find an INTJ just because of the systematizing and the architecting that mind that the INTJ has. So, I mean, I honestly like if I could just get INTJs to do it, like the particular job that I'm doing, which is root cause analysis, if I could just get INTJs, I almost think we would just be hitting home runs all the time. Um, but at the same time, I know we do have customer complaints on our team, and a lot of those have been directed towards the INTJs, partly because we get to loggerheads on it's really just around communication. Sometimes it's just the simple ways that we can kind of miscommunicate. And um, but that's really only talking about the last thing you brought up, which is just the communication styles, really. Um, but no, I mean, personally, for INTJs, I say this, I kind of have a bromance, and I even say this with like the INTJ women, and there's a little bit of sarcasm there because really they tend to be some of the most masculine uh, personality types, right? The INTJs. And so I tell the women, the INT, I've got one on my phone right now. I could show you that I've got a bromance with, right? Um, and so I really enjoy the ways that we converse, the INTJs and me. But regarding addressing your earlier point, though, that sometimes we kind of get off the same page. Um, there's a couple of things to be concerned about, and that I think people should be concerned about with ENTPs. And that is, we have extroverted feeling. And extroverted feeling, it's the empathizing function. It's kind of like almost mind reading. I mean, I would say extroverted feeling is really, in my personal opinion, it's more powerful than extroverted intuition in some ways. Um, it's it's really having almost like a feeling sense of what other people's emotions are, and there's so much information that you can decipher from that. It's some people call it reading the room, or um, you know just reading the emotions off of another individual you're talking to. And now you know I'm not saying I'm the best at it, but I do think um, what happens with it is it's kind of a powerful uh, wavelength, really, because you can kind of suck people into it, and you can make them feel, oh, hey, yeah, we're vibing, like,
Yeah.
oh gosh, this is right. But and then that can almost take the place of actual communication, where I'm reading back to you what I think I heard you say, or validating back to you my understanding exactly of, here's what I just perceived that you said, and here's the meaning and the actions that I'm going to go take out of what you said. I think that would be maybe a more productive way to interact with the ENTPs um, is just to do that sanity check. Say, what do you? So I know you could even tee it up and say, I know sometimes I have my own directive approach to thinking through my thought process, but I want to give you a chance to kind of just read it back to me, like your understanding, see if we're on the same page, or something that kind of allows them the chance to kind of um, confirm back to you, but also own it. Where you give them a chance to own the ideas fully and clarify anything that may need to be clarified. But I don't know. I think that might be more productive, because the problem with extroverted feeling, and it's a problem for me too, is that because it's so powerful, um, I can almost it's very easy to overpromise what my understanding is. I might quickly nod when really I need to slow down, and like I said with the cat, it's like, oh, the cat's there. Uh-huh, that's a cat. I'm gonna interact with the cat. And really maybe slow it down a little and just say, well, it's not just that I'm having a positive experience with the cat, but here's exactly what that means to me. And maybe slowing it down just a little bit so there's more meaning behind the head nod or the positive affirmation or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point, and that's great advice. Yeah, some people are really, really talented at making you feel understood, and it has very positive social effects. But when it comes to, like startups or projects where you have to really understand each other, uh, just getting into specifics and asking for, repeating back, making sure that really the details are in sync and not just the social like dynamics of what's going on. That
Right.
I think that, yeah, that's really good advice. Um, yeah, and both of these things I think are exacerbated by immaturity, right? Like when we're young, we sort of assume that everyone's kind of the same as we are, and it takes sometimes painful life experiences to realize that people are actually different. And
Yeah.
I've noticed that the problems are the worst with like immature ENTPs for
Mm.
sure. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I've gotten better at, from my end trying to bridge the gap, and I can tell you're used to it as well. You've worked with a lot of people, and you've been observant, and yeah, that's really great. So, I know a lot of my ENTPs who are kind of old, but still haven't gotten there yet. Um, so I'm wondering, like, as as a kid, what was it like being an ENTP as a kid, growing up,
Mm.
and when, like, what were some, I don't know, maybe some experiences when you realized that other people were different from you?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a great question. Of course, everybody's different from everyone a little bit, right? But um, I guess, yeah, I think the time that I guess I really thought, oh, I really am a little bit different, um, was probably around kindergarten, but kindergarten, first grade time frame. I mean, just it's that first socialization experience. I mean, I was in preschool as well, so I did fourth as a 4 year old, I had the kind of the preschool 3 hours a day, 2.5 hours a day thing. Um, but I think in kindergarten, of course, you're exposed. I had first through sixth graders also in the same school, so I'm around them, and one of the things, the kind of the feedbacks that I got was, different. There was a couple things I noticed going back now, kind of Monday night quarterbacking, is that, hey, the colors you're wearing are different. I had like this kind of ski mask, uh, very dark hat that came way down here, and people were like, "Whoa, you look like a burglar," or whatever. Um, and then like I remember in what was it, fifth grade or so, that's MC Hammer was big back then, fifth or sixth grade, so, and they had MC Hammer pants. Of course, I had to get MC Hammer pants, but the very flashy, high contrast colors. That's something that always I grew up with, where it's like, well, if I'm wearing blue jeans, I should wear a red sweater or something. And so just
Yeah.
super high contrast, right? And I think all my brothers and sisters were like, "Oh, my eyes, Joel, please put some earth tones on or something." And um, so I've always kind of had that sense, okay, well, this is just, I'm just a little different, I guess, but that's what I like. I don't know. I guess there's always a little bit of that going on, but I was always, as I look back on it, I got comfortable being weird. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, there was one time where there was a fat kid, in fifth grade. Um, he was in his car driving past my house, and he says, "Hey, fatso," as I was walking out on the sidewalk. And I've always been a rail, skinny as a rail. And I just remember I saw him at school. I said, uh, and I just did the look up and down, and I just said, "I'm a fatso." And of course, I pushed all his buttons when I said that, right? I shouldn't have done it, but like, you're calling me a fatso? And he just wanted to beat the crap out of me, and he pretty much did beat the crap out of me. And I still have like little scars where my lip got cut up and stuff. But
Huh.
um,
Do you think that's just him insulting people the way that would hurt him?
yeah, it's kids being kids. I'm sure he had a hard family life and stuff, but that, I guess, more than anything, that's like, um, it kind of shows that the ENTP, just, it's called the jester archetype or the debater. They always got to like be the truth teller, even when it's not helpful.
Hmm.
Like, it's probably better left unsaid.
Yeah, when I was reading about ENTPs, one of the things that made me realize that I actually knew a lot of them, like when I'm first reading about the personality types, first I only care about my own type, and then I care about the types that I'd be compatible with in dating, and then I start looking at adjacent types, and when I got to ENTP, I was like, okay, do I even know any ENTPs? And the thing that made me realize I knew a lot was uh when it described them as like they like to play devil's advocate
Mm-hmm.
and they like debating a lot. And I was like, okay, I know a few people. Okay. And then I read the description again. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's them. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No. And well, the funny thing about it is the ENTPs need you. I mean, we're the extroverts. We need to suck the brains of the introverts in order to have thoughts that we can claim as our own. That's literally how ENTPs work, is we kind of parasite off of the other good ideas that are out there. So um, yeah, it's there. We're going to find you. We're going to find you, Mike.
Crap. I'm kidding. It's feeling like, crap. Makes me, a little scared. But no, I actually like that because I don't want to be going out and trying to find people. So really helps that there are people who do.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so when it comes to dating, you probably look for introverts then, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, to do, I think to have a really good balance, and we can get into the topics of compatibility. Compatibility really is kind of the idea of the opposites, which you're getting at here. You compatible relationship is, opposites attract, whereas camaraderie is more like, finding people that have your same cognitive functions. It's more brotherly, sisterly, or camaraderie type relationships. But yeah, if you really want a good romantic relationship, one that's where you're really performing the function of what a romantic partner should have, is yeah, you kind of do want to have a little bit of the opposites of what you are, I think.
Yeah, I'm trying to wonder, or I'm trying to figure out what things you want in common and what things you want to be complementary. Um, I for just speaking for myself, it's stereotypical, but it's true that I'm usually pretty attracted to ENFPs, and we share extroverted thinking and introverted feeling. Maybe that's
Yeah,
important because it's kind of what your judgments are based on, so you kind of value the same things. Um, but then introverted intuition and extroverted intuition, I feel like they go together very well.
yeah,
It's like a magnet, like two, positive sides are just not they're gonna repel a little bit. Um, but introverted and extroverted intuition seem to really connect well to each other. So yeah, maybe is that it? Perceiving functions, it's good to be different, and judging functions, it's good to be similar. What do you think?
exactly. You took the words out of my mouth, because the perceiving functions, it's very difficult to trigger along the perception functions when when you because essentially what happens in a romantic relationship, a really good, you know opposites attract kind of romantic relationship, is you're giving someone the keys to your unconscious brain. You're saying, look, I don't have access to this. I don't even know what's down there, but you do. That's why I'm attracted to you, because every time I'm around you, it's like something inside me lights up, and I don't know what it is, but it's really the unconscious and subconscious part of your brain. And I just feel alive whenever I'm around you. That's like you're describing the ENFP. It's like, whoa, something just turned on. And they're essentially giving voice to those parts of you that lay dormant or unconscious during the day. They they give voice to it, and it's like as soon as they speak, it's like, oh my gosh, it's a revelation. They're saying something that I already knew, but I didn't know that I knew. And that's what they do to you. Like when they fall into relationship with you, they're giving you the keys to their unconscious. And so it's a very powerful, like it's a power transaction, right? That you're both entering into. And the question is, can we safely enter into this relationship without damaging each other? Because I'm gonna have these access to these wires in the back of your head, and I'm probably gonna reroute some of them, and you won't even know that I'm doing it. Do you trust me? And do I trust you to do the same thing as we kind of integrate our lives? And I think the really important question is, can we trust them to not trigger us in ways that are too terribly damaging? And like you just said, the judging functions tend to be very um, powerful, you know, thinking and feeling. If we are not aligned on those, it and if we're not very well integrated in our own mind, like the conscious side to the unconscious traits. So in other words, for me, it would be if my introverted thinking, conscious thinking hasn't figured out a way to uh, cite my sources, right? Which is the extroverted thinking. If the introverted thinking hasn't bridged enough to go back there and say, wait a minute, it's logical that I do need to cite my sources, because so many people depend on that to get to trust my authority, well, then it's going to be difficult to interact with the world with that weak bridge unless I find somebody who can help activate that in me. And um, and so I really do think it's a dance between how integrated are you in yourself, how mature, like kind of like what you said with maturity, like how mature of an ENTP are they, or an INTJ? And if you've been to enough judo matches, or cognitive judo matches, so to say, you've done the shadow work to fix and repair what needs to be repaired, and then you may be integrated enough to actually get into romantic partnership with somebody that does have the opposite judging functions. But from my experience, it's very rare. Like, just doing my survey of things, it's very rare to find people that are opposite functions in the judging function. It's much more common that they have opposite perceiving functions, which, if somebody triggers you on perceiving, it doesn't hurt as bad from what I can see.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was a long, hopefully I didn't go too long on that. It's just,
No, you're
yeah,
good. I'm just kind of soaking it in and thinking about it. Uh, it's just complicated, There are all kinds of shades of differences between different functions, and some are deeper in the subconscious than others. And
mm,
sometimes I feel like even though extroverted intuition isn't in my stack, sometimes I relate to it more than extroverted sensing. That's kind of a weird dynamic. Like it's not supposed to be that that high up in the
interesting.
ordering, right? Um, but I when I look at it and I look at it doing its thing, brainstorming or whatever, seeing connections rapidly, um, there's like a familiar spirit to it
Mm,
in a way, even though it almost hurts my brain to act that way. Um, like it's very taxing. It takes so much energy. It's like I'm trying to turn my brain inside out. Um, but there's something about it that's warm and appealing. Whereas
interesting.
extroverted sensing is kind of more, it flips between being extremely awkward and extremely exciting. So I don't know.
Wow. Wow, that is really interesting. Yeah. Well, it's good to hear that you do occasionally at least get excited by it, because that means you've got the ability to be attracted. I mean, we talk about how attraction works through the INTJ, and a lot of it comes through the extroverted sensing, and that's really important for an INTJ, because a lot of times, you're, I've at least referred to the INTJ as the disembodied brain, right? It's like you're the brain in the relationship, the kind of this, uh, really, like, this is my value, but it's nice to have someone who can humanize you, and how do you find that person? Well, it's through extroverted sensing. Well, I need to find somebody that can pay attention to this, the way I'm presenting, and it's a good thing to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, this has been a really great discussion. I'm glad you agreed to come on and talk about this stuff. Pretty basic stuff, just general personality, what it's like to be an ENTP, and um, what do you feel like there's anything missing from this? Do you want to add anything, or what do you think?
I think it's a great starter. I mean, is this like the first video that you've uh, done on this
Yeah,
Myers-Briggs stuff?
this is the first of this type that I've done.
One thing that I would like to challenge folks with is just this one concept, which is, you just shared, for example, how you've got this connection between your introverted intuition and extroverted intuition. It's almost like your introverted intuition has gotten so powerful that it's been able to kind of reach down into the unconscious, and whether through tentacles or the actual plumbing that's up there, it actually through brute force or whatever, you you did find those common links and pushed your way into them. What I want to get into people's minds is that these Myers-Briggs functions, they really are a result of plumbing, and they're a result of the way that we like to perceive the world. And that's very much about the blood flow to the amygdala, to the prefrontal cortex. Um, it's the blood flow to our limbic system and how quickly we react to our environment using our emotions versus thinking. And all of these things are determined physiologically. And so I, I I'm really doubling down, at least, and I don't have, it's hard to measure, right? To put our whole brain system under a microscope. But the more I dabble with the system, the more I become convinced that the psychological types and cognitive functions that fall out of this Myers-Briggs system are a result of the plumbing, the physiology that we have. And so what that means is that Myers-Briggs is really a typology that tells us about our nature, our biological nature, whereas other systems like ocean they kind of tell you, what did the person train themselves to be? How did they nurture themselves into their personality? And anybody can be habituated or trained like a monkey to behave a certain way consistently over time. And that's what the ocean model gives you. But the Myers-Briggs, if I could just leave one thought that I hope people take home, is that the Myers-Briggs is about nature as much as, I'm sure there's components of nurture there too, but it's, we want to understand how are our colleagues, how are our friends, family, how are they going to interact when they're in fight or flight? When the volcano is coming down the mountain, when it's Armageddon, how do they interact when they're in their unconscious? There's a very few times, if you think about it, when that's happening. You know, uh, for those who've been in marriage relations, sexual orgasm, that's a very much predetermined thing that happens through kind of those unconscious modes of how we are. And so I'm interested in those just as much as I am interested in like the nature stuff, the mask that people have learned to wear, that comes through the ocean model. So that's, I guess, one
Yeah.
thought.
Yeah, and that's what I like about Jungian types is the idea that it's a stable trait. And yeah, I have seen studies where the traits are like 40% heritable. I don't understand it all the way, but the thing that's one idea just popped in my head was, where are these traits determined? Because um I have a video in the past where I talked about psychological functions and archetypes. How do you inherit archetypes? Like, how are these symbols actually inherited? Because they they have a lot of information in them. Is that all part of DNA, or is it learned? And I realized that the way the brain develops, it's very plastic and dynamic,
Yeah.
but it's around the edges where the physiology really, where you get hard coded things.
Mm.
And so I think that these traits, I'm wondering what patterns are instantiated from genes that results in different ways of perceiving the world and interacting with it. So it's all really exciting, interesting to me, the neuroscience behind it. And I kind of wish there was more research. There is some. Have you heard of Dario Nardi?
It sounds familiar, but I'm not sure that I have.
I don't know if he's done anything recently on this, but he put functional MRI machines, caps, whatever you call them, on people, and he did personality, MBTI. Um, he looked at the psychological functions. He found a pattern of thinking when Introverted intuitive types are thinking about the future or solving hard problems. Their whole brain kind of goes into a calm but active state. But for extroverted intuitives, it's more like a Christmas tree. It's very, it lights up all over, and it just goes crazy.
Wow.
So yeah, that would be worth looking into. It's been probably 8 years or so, but yeah, I don't know what he's done recently, but yeah, it's really
Yeah,
cool
that's
stuff.
fascinating. The question of heritability is a good one because you've heard the term of like the black sheep in the family, and a lot of families have multiple quote unquote black sheep, where they just don't. Well, they're whatever they poke the bear too many times or whatever. But it does give credence in my mind that a lot of these things do come through the DNA. To your point, can some of them morph a little bit? It's kind of the epigenetic question. Is it that maybe we were born to be systematizers or, intuitor thinkers, and that could manifest either as an INTJ or an ENTP? I mean, maybe that maybe there are little turning points, I guess, between the ages of 1 and 2, where some of those kind of the epigenome decides which way it's going to go, possibly. But that's it's a very interesting.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And hopefully we get the opportunity to have more conversations, and this is the type of stuff that it would be fun to dive into. The philosophy, I know we have a ton of ideas I've never heard anywhere else, so that'd be fun to learn more about. Um, but
Right
yeah,
on.
thanks a lot for coming on, and yeah, I appreciate learning about you and your experiences and your ideas.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. This was fun. All right. Yeah. See you later.
Thanks.